Hello, everyone. Hi. Can everyone hear me all right? Can you hear me all the way in the back? Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful afternoon. Today is going to be very special. And before I tell you a little bit about more about today's program, I just want to tell you a little bit of exciting news. As many of you may have noticed, we have new carpeting here in Meeting Room A. And beginning in January, that carpet project will expand throughout all the public spaces in the library as we replace flooring library-wide. And as you can imagine, this is a massive undertaking. If you've ever recarpeted your home, you may try to blow that up into the library version, which means every bookshelf and every piece of furniture will need to be carefully moved to accommodate that work. And along the ways, walls will be painted, some repairs will be made, there will be some new furniture. And I'm proud to say that this work will be funded through the generosity of the local option sales tax that we recently passed. And along with a gift fund stewarded by the Iowa City Public Library Board of Trustees, made possible through the gifts to the Iowa City Public Library Friends Foundation. So thank you to all of our donors to help expand that work. So libraries remain among the most trusted and beloved public institutions in America. The generosity of our donors, the incredible attendance at our programs, and the more than 120 people through our doors an hour demonstrate something important. Public libraries remain essential, vibrant, and deeply needed. This year, we will also begin conducting assessments and community planning work to help shape the future of the library. I hope that you'll subscribe to our newsletters and visit our website and participate in that process and help give us some feedback to help shape the future of the library. We also want to better understand the needs of the people who are not library users, how we can welcome them, serve them, and bring more people into this shared civic space. You're here today because you already believe in the work of the library, and we're grateful for your support in helping to bring even more people to the table. So when I think of Charity Nebbe, I think first of her voice. It's a voice with a smile embedded in it, warm, inviting, and deeply human, but also the voice of someone with remarkable command of whatever subject she's exploring. Her curiosity is both expansive and rigorous, grounded in thoughtful research and genuine interest, whether she's discussing garden pests, which I have benefited from, civil rights, literature, or the history or changing culture of Iowa itself. Over the course of a long and distinguished career spanning radio, television, public speaking, publishing, and journalism, Charity has helped reflect Iowa back to Iowans. She has told our stories with intelligence, compassion, and care. Through Charity's book club, she has invited readers across the state into thoughtful conversations about literature, ideas, and our shared humanity, strengthening literacy and civic dialogue in the process. And I shared with Charity when we met up today that in a past position, I said to my boss, I'm not doing a very good job of taking time off from work. I will be joining Charity's book club. And I will be reading the books and going to the radio programs, and I know they're in the middle of the day. And he said, good. I'm so glad to hear that. Public media and public libraries are natural partners. In many ways, public media serves as a vital town square, while libraries remain the enduring civic centers, both committed to lifelong learning, free access to information, public discourse, civic engagement, and community building. We are incredibly fortunate to have Charity choose Iowa to return home and dedicate her career to telling Iowa stories. Now, today would not be possible without the generosity of several key sponsors, including Iowa Public Radio, Beatology Iowa, and Catherine and John Moyers. And we are grateful to Charity herself, who generously donated her time today to benefit the Iowa City Public Library. Let's give all those folks a round of applause. Now, as we know, both public media and public libraries have recently faced legislative challenges that threaten the essential work that these institutions do. And I'm proud to say that according to the American Library Association, Iowans have been among the most engaged advocates in the country for First Amendment rights, intellectual freedom, and preservation of the continued support of these vital resources. Charity has helped create space for these conversations on the radio time and again, educating listeners about the implications of these proposals, and helping the public better understand what is at stake. I'm also happy to say that none of the proposed bills in Iowa made it through this year. Thank you to all of you that spoke up. We really appreciate it. At a moment when thoughtful conversation, trusted information, and genuine community feel more important than ever, people like Charity Nebbe remind us what public institutions can do at their very best. They can help us understand one another a little better. They can help us stay curious, and they can help us stay connected. And that is why it feels especially meaningful to welcome her here today. In a library surrounded by readers, listeners, neighbors, and lifelong learners, let's all welcome Charity Nebbe.
Oh, thank you all so much. I think that's the nicest introduction I have ever had, and now I feel like maybe I shouldn't talk. I feel like Katie kind of took care of it. But I am here today, and I'm so glad to be here in this room with you. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to those of you who've made it possible for me to be here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I'm going to talk a lot about the work that I do. I am an Iowan. I was born and raised in Iowa, and I don't know if others who grew up in the state felt this sort of patriotic fervor about Iowa when we were kids. Yes, I mean, it was obviously Iowa exceptionalism that we were being indoctrinated with, but I bought into it hook, line, and sinker. And when I got to 5th grade and I got to do Iowa history, I was obsessed, absolutely obsessed. And I loved everything that I could learn, particularly about the settling of Iowa, the pioneer movement. And I imagined I was a young Kate Shelley crawling across the bridge at Moingona with my lantern, and then the lantern, you know the whole story. Anyway, I was really, really into it. And as I got older, when I was in junior high, I started volunteering at the Cedar Falls Historical Society. We had a Victorian House museum, and it was not a very popular museum, so I had a lot of hours there by myself, and I would go through all of the research. I'd actually go up into the attic and go through the boxes. I don't think I was supposed to be doing that, but I just wanted to learn so much about the people who came before me. And I'm going to take a few minutes later on to talk about how my understanding of history really evolved over time. But remember, I was all in. In fact, when I was in 8th grade, I participated in National History Day, and I did a performance where I portrayed Abby Gardner Sharp and told the story of what we then called the Spirit Lake Massacre. As I got older, my interest broadened. Politics, science, international relations. I went to Iowa State University. I did an internship at the State House. And the best thing for me in college was that I also got a job at WOI Radio, which is now a part of Iowa Public Radio. And my first job was as an overnight board operator. I worked from midnight to 5 a.m. and I pushed one button once an hour. It was pretty glamorous. But, I also got my hands into everything that I possibly could and started really learning the craft of radio, but also I got to start telling Iowa stories. And I certainly got hooked on that. After I graduated from college, I left Iowa for 9 months. I worked in Indiana, then I came back and I worked at WOI full-time. In 2000, I moved to Michigan, and I worked at Michigan Radio in Ann Arbor, and I really loved Michigan, and I still love Michigan. I worked there for 10 years, but one of the real benefits to moving away, to working outside your home state, is that you begin to develop, at least I did, a real clarity in looking at Iowa, in really understanding what makes this state unique, and seeing the positives and seeing the negatives with so much more clarity. So that kind of deepened, in many ways, my connection to Iowa. And then I had a child. So pretty much as soon as we had our first child, my husband and I were talking about how do we get back to Iowa? The pull of family, our incredible public school system, the quality of life. These were things that I really wanted for my family. So in 2010, my daughter was 5, just about to start kindergarten. My son was 3, and we moved back to Iowa. And I got the job hosting Talk of Iowa. I promised myself a couple of big things. One thing that I promised myself was that I would never take the Iowa sky for granted. They have a sky in Michigan, but it is not as good. I really, really missed it, and I had no idea. But then I also promised myself that I would do my best to tell Iowa stories, and not the kinds of happy fairy tales that I was obsessed with when I was in 5th grade, that I would tell true, nuanced stories. I would amplify the voices of Iowans. I would listen, really listen. That's the secret skill of a talk show host. That's the thing you have to be best at, is listening. I would listen. I would learn about my fellow Iowans. And I would try to build community and connection and empathy by sharing those stories. So let's go back in time to that History Day performance. 1987, I read everything I could about the Spirit Lake Massacre. And of course, this was before the internet. So everything I could was at the public library in Cedar Falls. It was at my school library at Pete Junior High. And I knew that story in and out. I knew the horror. I knew the heartbreak, the long imprisonment, 34 settlers murdered, 4 women taken prisoner. 2 of them were later killed. But none of those sources said anything at all about the other side of the story. And as young and naive and sheltered as I was, I didn't even think about the other side of the story at that point. The side told this way in an article written by Katie Prout. This was published on LitHub in 2017. On March 8, 1857, the sun was out when what was left of the Wapikute Dakota, led by Inkpaduta, returned to this land, the land that they had been living on further back than memory could attest, land that Inkpaduta had refused to sign away, even after a drunk white whiskey trader killed his children, killed his nephews, killed his wife, and put his brother's head on a pike, unintentionally making him chief. Inkpaduta, 60, an old man with the knowledge of decades and the power of a new ruler and a heart that was broken, they, what was left of the Wapikute Dakota, returned to the land they loved, only to find that in their time away, someone else had built upon it walls and a door. And does that mean that the Gardners, Abby's parents, were villains? I don't believe that it does. They were products of their time. They probably believed in manifest destiny. They probably believed that indigenous people were less than human. Most European settlers did. They may not have even known that that land was inhabited, but even if they did, they probably would have felt that it was their right or even their duty to settle it, to civilize it. And when I look at something from history, I don't want to vilify anyone most of the time. I want to understand what happened. I want to understand the forces that shaped our state, that shape our country. And I also want to understand how 2 human beings can look at each other and not see the value of the other's life, because that is something in history that we see repeated over and over again in ways big, in small ways as well. And we'll talk about history a little bit more in a moment too, but I'll tell you, the first 6 years of my life, I lived in Ogden, Iowa, tiny Ogden, Iowa. It's 9 miles west of Boone. Does that help? And between kindergarten and 1st grade, we moved to Cedar Falls. And that was a wonderful place to grow up. I had the luxury that I hope most kids have of really taking my life for granted. I would love for all children to be able to take their quality of life for granted. And I will say, again, as a naive, sheltered child, I never questioned why Cedar Falls was almost entirely a white community, whereas Waterloo is a truly diverse community. I didn't know until I was an adult that I was living in one of the most segregated metropolitan areas in the United States. And it wasn't until many years after I moved back to Iowa and I started hosting Talk of Iowa that I first read the work of Nicole Hannah-Jones. And it turns out that Nicole Hannah-Jones and I have so much in common. We are the same age, and we grew up 10 miles apart from each other. She lived in Waterloo. I lived in Cedar Falls. Our dads are both veterans of the Vietnam War. We both loved to read. We were both interested in history. We both grew up to be journalists. And of course, Nicole Hannah-Jones, a little more accomplished as a journalist than I am, but there are a lot of similarities. There are also some very stark differences as well, of course. Hannah-Jones is black. I'm white. I went to great, well-funded schools. My classmates were 98% white. Hannah-Jones didn't go to her neighborhood school. She was bused to a school across town in an effort to integrate the schools. And in my safe, happy bubble, 10 miles away, I honestly believed that racism was mostly historical. I really thought the civil rights movement had settled that. And of course, Nicole Hannah-Jones knew better because of her lived experience, because of the education that she got from her loved ones, but also because she had family members who loved her, white family members who loved her but wanted nothing to do with her black father. And when she was in high school, one of her teachers, Ray Dial, gave her a book. It was called Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. And in that book, she learned about the White Lion, a ship that brought the first enslaved Africans to North America. It landed in Virginia in 1619, and she never forgot. Later, she created the 1619 Project, and I spoke to her when the book version came out, and here she is explaining why that date felt and feels so important to her.
The decision 400 years ago to purchase enslaved Africans would shape so much about the country that would come. It would be a factor in the American Revolution. It would be a factor, in how our country nearly dissolved during the Civil War. Some of our worst societal tensions that we see now go back to that moment. So I really wanted to bring that date kind of out of the obscurity of history. And then I wanted to, through a series of essays, show how that legacy of a foundational American institution continues to shape the society that we live in very many ways, even though we don't often realize it. So there's essays on capitalism and American capitalism roots in slavery, on traffic patterns and how that goes back to the anti-Blackness that develops out of slavery. Everything from, why Americans consume so much sugar to democracy itself. And it was just a way for us to understand that an institution that was practiced in this country for 250 years still shapes so much about our society, even though we don't know it.
And I already told you that I'm a history nerd. So I had already discovered before the 1619 Project that I had missed out on a lot of our nation's history. And I had read books and watched documentaries to try to fill in some of those important gaps. But when I read the 1619 Project, it was like, I felt like I was looking at a jigsaw puzzle that I thought was complete. And it turned out it had all just been kind of mashed together with all these missing pieces or pieces that didn't really fit together, stuck together. It was just this incredible moment where I got so many of those missing pieces. And to me, that's so exciting. It's so exciting to learn more, to understand more, to have a richer understanding of my world. And so it's really hard for me, and I'm good at empathy, but it is hard for me to understand this rejection of ideas, this rejection of history that we're living through at this moment, because I think that we are all richer and better when we know more. Side note, Ray Dial lives in Iowa City. Perhaps some of you know him. He is now Reverend Ray Dial, and he's at the Bethel AME Church here in Iowa City. My love of learning is the reason that I have dedicated my life to public broadcasting. I do love radio specifically, but it is that passion for lifelong learning. I get to learn something new every single day, and I love that I get to share that with people. And one of the things that I have always loved about Iowa, I even remember thinking this was hilarious and fun when I was a kid, is how if somebody spent like a minute here, we will claim them. You know, they're one of our people. Like, how many of us have proudly told lots of people that Kurt Vonnegut lived in Iowa City, right? He lived here for 2 years. We still call his house the Vonnegut House. 2 years. We're so proud. And you know, Nicole Hannah-Jones was born and raised in Iowa. And our legislature actually had drafted legislation that specifically by name banned her project. And they took out the name. But she won a Pulitzer Prize. She is a brilliant woman. She is an Iowan. And she seems like someone we should be incredibly proud of. Also, if you want to know more, she also invests a great deal of time and energy into Waterloo, Iowa today, and you should find out about the 1619 Freedom School. They are doing really, really cool work. And I realize that I'm sharing with you a strong opinion that I have. I don't share my political beliefs in public forums because I am a journalist. But when I was growing up in Iowa, I did, you know, again, that patriotic fervor, I did think that we all believed in the Constitution. We all believed in democracy. We all believed in the Bill of Rights. These were things that I took for granted. And I still believe, I still believe in democracy. I still believe in the Bill of Rights. And I have a slide of it, but I think that I've gotten my things a little bit out of order. So I'll save the Bill of Rights and that First Amendment for a moment. But one of the things that is under attack right now in our country, as Katie mentioned a few minutes ago, are our libraries. And they're such incredible public institutions. And I just want to talk a little bit about my love of libraries. So I mentioned I spent the first few years of my life in Ogden, Iowa. This is my library, the Leonard A. Good Community Library in Ogden, Iowa. And that's where I first fell in love with libraries. And it wasn't just libraries, it was librarians. So there were 2 librarians at that library that I loved so much, Jean Phipps and Patty Lincoln. We moved away from Ogden when I was 6 years old. We still had family in Ogden, so every time we would go back to visit family, I would go visit my friends at the library. And so this is little Charity, and this is my doll, my favorite doll, and I named her Jean Phipps. And I always used her full name. And my wonderful friend, I stayed friends with both Jean and Patty until their deaths. This is my friend Jean. She died when she was 90 years old, and that's her holding my second child, my son Carter. So I'm so incredibly grateful for those friendships, but it was also about the library, right? It was definitely about the library. And when we moved to Cedar Falls, my next library was the library at Southdale Elementary School. And I was a voracious reader from the moment I could read. I read everything I could get my hands on. So I had exhausted the Cedar Falls Public Library, or the Cedar Falls Southdale School Library by the time I was in 3rd grade. There was nothing left. So then I started hanging out at the Cedar Falls Public Library and spent so many quality, wonderful hours there. And then I turned 11, and that's the year that I kind of finished the children's section at the Cedar Falls Public Library. And this was really, really problematic for me because you had to be 12 to get an adult library card at the Cedar Falls Public Library. And when people talk about librarians putting inappropriate books into the hands of children, they would not let me check out anything that was meant for adults. And they watched me like a hawk. My dad came in and he asked if I could have access to the adult section, and they said no. And it is funny, but at that time it was also really, really hard for me because I was in 5th grade and I needed books. I needed books there because books for me were like, I don't know, they were my salvation. They were my armor in a way. When I was in 5th grade, I went through a really difficult period where I was bullied at school, and a girl who wanted me to do something that I wouldn't do got frustrated with me, and she told a lot of stories, and I was almost entirely ostracized for 2 years, 5th and 6th grade. And it was really hard. And this was the 80s, so bullying was not taken very seriously back then. There was no blood spilled, so that wasn't a big deal. I got a lot of kind lectures about maybe how I could change my behavior to fit in better. That was a lot of lonely recesses. And books were what I had. So I was really stuck. But my dad checked out a lot of books for me. Some of them were hits, some of them were misses. But I did get through. And I've reflected on that time in a lot of different ways. I think about it. I told you my slides were out of order, so we'll skip the First Amendment. But I think about, there were adults in my life who had really failed me, but I think about how books were there for me, and they were so incredibly important. They gave me friends. They helped me develop empathy for people who were not like me. They gave me the opportunity to live all of these different lives, to learn about history, to even travel to other worlds. And this is, I think, many librarians, many teachers' favorite quotes about books. But I just think it's so important. This is Rudine Sims Bishop. Books are sometimes windows offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through in imagination to become part of whatever world has been created or recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of a larger human experience. Reading them becomes a means of self-affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. And as a straight white girl, I saw myself reflected all over the place when I was growing up. And that representation, that affirmation, meant everything to me at that time. I couldn't have told you that. I had no idea why that was so important to me because it was everywhere. I could take it for granted. Diversifying my reading as I got older, when I realized, oh, am I only reading books by dead white people? I should read other books. Has given me so many more windows to look through. It's made me a better person. It's made me a better radio host. And over the years, I've had a lot of conversations with guests about representation and the power of representation. And there was this incredible moment where I asked one guest, he was a professor of media studies, a gay black man, and I asked him when he first saw himself reflected in media. And he said, when he was growing up. And he said, I don't think I ever did. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a group of student journalists at West High. A lot of people ask me which side of town I live on, West High. And they wanted to know who I had interviewed who was famous. And I've interviewed a lot of famous people, so I was doing some name dropping, trying to connect with Gen Z. And I mentioned that I had interviewed Rick Riordan. And he's the author of all those Percy Jackson books, many other books. And after I was done, a young man came up to me and he told me that Rick Riordan had saved his life. And he offered to share a poem with me that he had written about it. Jack Alden is the name of this young man. He was a senior at Iowa City West High at the time, and I invited him on the radio to do an interview with me and to read his poem, and I want to share it with you.
It's titled Representation Matters. Trigger warning for talk of suicide. When I was 11, I realized I wasn't straight. I thought I deserved to die, and I nearly killed myself, but there were 2 reasons that I didn't. Number 1, I was and still am terrified of dying, but it postponed me killing myself at best. I kept thinking, I'll wait for a sign from God telling me I'm wrong. I desperately hoped for one to say that you are not evil, and I don't think I exactly got one. Number 2, in 6th grade, I was reading the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. I was on the House of Hades book, chapter 36, page 292, the 10th line. I had a crush on Percy, Nico spat. Not all heroes wear capes, but many have pens. Reading that made the difference between a paper cut and a knife cut, between turning my lights out and keeping them on to reread, reanalyze, and commit to memory those lines. That line kept the headline as whatever it was supposed to be, not 11-year-old kills herself. It kept me alive long enough to know it should be himself, not herself. It made the difference between a body bag and me grabbing my school bag and putting the book in to always have it near. It made the difference between me and a grave and me standing here. I am alive due to a book. The book talks about gods, but isn't a religious text. Religion was why I was in need of saving in the first place. The difference between reading a story and a news story, of staying up late reading and never getting up, a few chapters versus the end of my life, a few pages saved my life. That one line ended a headline, and that is why representation matters. That is why you should want diversity. I am alive due to a few words that changed my story. It did not affect yours, I promise. Representation is why I'm alive.
And I'm still struck. I'm still struck by how minor that representation was. Just that line, and how powerful it was, how radically it changed Jack's life and his self-image. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful mirror. We need books, we need libraries, we need diverse books. They can literally save lives. And now I want to plug my book club. So there were bookmarks out on the table when you came in, and I hoped you grabbed them. And we've been doing the book club since 2020, so we're in our 6th year. It's probably actually more like our 5th year. But we read 6 books a year, and they're all on that bookmark that you picked up. You can listen to IPR at 90.9. Someone made those bookmarks for an event in Central Iowa, and it's very exclusive. So, but we have a great event coming up in June. We're reading Founding Mothers by Cokie Roberts for the 250th anniversary of our nation, and we're having a live discussion at the Cedar Rapids Public Library on June 2nd at 6 p.m. So please come, please read. You can listen to that conversation on the air the next week. It'll be on Tuesday the 9th. So I promised to talk a little bit about me. Oh, right. See, I put things in the wrong order today. Anyway, this was just to also emphasize that books are not dangerous. We don't have to ban them. Let children read whatever they want and then talk about it with them. If parents and kids can talk together, we won't have as much censorship because we won't have as much fear. Judy Blume is a true American hero. When I moved back to Iowa in 2010 to work at Iowa Public Radio, I also got in touch with Iowa PBS and to see if I could do any freelancing with them. And so I know a lot of you probably know me from my work on Iowa PBS. I find that there are people who know me from IPR, there are people who know me from Iowa PBS, and then there's this beautiful, beautiful, tiny group in that Venn diagram who are my favorite people who know me from both. And I love that. But I did start doing a little bit of hosting for Iowa PBS, and then I met Deb Herbold, and she had this really fun idea to create a show about food in Iowa that really dug into the local foods movement. So that was the beginning of Iowa Ingredient, which I did for 10 years. I got to profile people growing food. I got to stand beside amazing chefs while they made amazing food in the studio kitchen. And of course, that show was canceled in 2021. Actually, I say of course. A lot of people don't know that it was canceled because Iowa PBS loves its reruns. And at some point, I'm like, people are going to stop recognizing me because I'm not even going to look like the woman who's on that show. People see me with my kids, and they're like, oh, I thought they were so much younger, because my kids made a few appearances. My son, the first time he was on the show, had to stand on an apple box because he was so short, and now he's 6'4". So a lot of things have changed. But what I really loved most about that show, I mean, it was a real labor of love for everybody involved. I loved everything about the show. But what I really loved most was that we really got to show people how beautiful our state is. The photography on that show is so incredible, and it's so beautiful, and we're so overlooked and underrated. So when we got nationally syndicated on PBS Create, I thought, good, people will see. People will see how beautiful and incredible and diverse and interesting and delicious Iowa can be. For the last couple of years, I've been hosting Iowa Life on Iowa PBS. It is what we call a magazine show. So it's actually very, very similar to what I do on Talk of Iowa. We are profiling people and places and telling Iowa stories and looking into Iowa history. I get to work with an incredible team there. Teresa Knight is the senior producer of that show, and we've got this very gifted team of producers there. A lot of people ask me how it's possible for me to do all the things that I do, and the secret is that in TV, I really only have to parachute in and do a little bit. I couldn't possibly give television the kind of energy that I give Iowa Public Radio, which is my full-time, 5-day-a-week, do homework at night, all-encompassing job. And I get to work with, of course, also an incredible team of producers at Iowa Public Radio. And when I moved back to Iowa in 2010, I also had the opportunity to work with the great Dennis Reese, who is sitting back there. So we had a lot of fun together and made a lot of great radio together before Dennis retired. So yes, TV's my side hustle. TV is my full-time job. It is also my first true love. And sometimes, you know, we talk about all kinds of different things, but sometimes we get to really dig deep on a project. And we just finished a series that we called The Great Divide. Just a couple of, is it 2 weeks ago now? Time flies. But that series also becomes the 4th season of our podcast, Unsettled. So if you're interested in all of those shows, you can search for Unsettled Iowa wherever you get your podcasts. And I want to just play some excerpts from that series for you. I'm so very proud. And so I'll read you a little bit of our scripting. Social isolation, disconnection, political polarization. It is no secret that we are living in a time of deep division. According to the American Psychological Association, the majority of adults in the United States say that societal division is a significant source of stress in their lives. We talked about how we feel that on a personal level in our communities and families, the cost of that strain. The divide between rich and poor continues to expand. Billionaires are calling the shots while young Americans wonder if they'll ever be able to afford a home. We explore how the growing wealth gap is shaping our future. Trust in news media is at an all-time low. These days, we don't just disagree with each other. We are living in separate realities. We find out how we got here. Then we learn about the funders and thinkers behind the rise of Christian nationalism. And we go to church to find out how politics intersect with faith. And in the final episode, we meet people who are building bridges and bringing people together in powerful and creative ways. So here's a taste.
So the society has sort of changed where the main areas where you socialize in the community were through these formal clubs and organizations. There's been a cultural shift in that people are willing to be involved in a project, but not necessarily be involved long-term in an organization. They might say, I might participate for this particular project, but then I'm going to step away. You know, the center of social life and community life is no longer in these organizations. They're sort of elsewhere. And that has to do with people commuting, and they kind of live a life in their hometown and they live a life in where they work.
The kind of belonging that one can find when one is reaching out and engaging across difference. They often report better health outcomes, greater civic participation. It's something that we see has kind of positive impacts across the board in finding ways for folks to come together and find connection and belonging with each other.
I went to every single John Deere picket line, and I just say, hey, why are you here? Why are you out here? They will tell you exactly how much money their CEO made during the pandemic. They will tell you that they were called essential, but they were treated as expendable during the pandemic. So in that strike, they turned down 2 really good contracts because they just wanted to punch Deere in the face twice. The longer you put off addressing income inequality, the more unstable our democracy becomes.
It is actually rather difficult for the majority of Americans who might not be that polarized to actually cast a vote that can change polarization. We are far more polarized at the political level than we are at the electoral level. But given the nature of our politics, given the way that media feeds into and supports those sorts of divisions, the more accommodating approach of the majority of Americans doesn't actually have a political avenue.
They're not aiming for the destruction of American democracy. They're just aiming to vote their values. But with their vote, they're lending support to a broader anti-democratic and Christian nationalist agenda.
I base everything that I do, whether it's in the pulpit or at the State House, in the gospel and the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? I do believe that faith and politics are deeply, deeply entwined, particularly at the level of policy. And we don't, of course, comment on partisan politics, right? I stay away from that.
I would just throw in that Bishop Monette's comments about her faith driving her views on public policy would be, by some definitions, a form of nationalism.
I've not ever been accused of being a Christian nationalist, and so I'm a little surprised that anything I said sounds like nationalism to you, because to me it sounds like gospel.
It just shows what is possible when people come together, right? It shows what's possible when people put aside whatever is going on and they focus on a celebratory goal like art, something that is beautiful, something that is inspiring, and how people come together. And I just think it's amazing. It's really, truly incredible. And I think that's what moves the needle the most.
there's some commonality there. We share some beliefs. What the Baptist church tradition talks about versus what the United Church of Christ tradition talks about might be a little different. But we approached it all as Christian women coming together to learn from each other. And I think each one of us deep down in our own hearts said, yeah, there's something important going on here, and we want to be a part of that. And how do we support each other?
There's a lot of good stuff in this series, and yeah, a lot of it's really depressing, but there were rays of hope in every single one of those shows, and I really left the week maybe shaken, but also with some more faith in my fellow man. I do want to return to one of the things that does disturb me the most, and of course I'm a journalist, and so the attacks on the free press in this country do disturb me a great deal. But I think that they should disturb all of us. At this point, for-profit journalistic organizations are having a really hard time making it. The whole profit structures that used to work so well have really broken down. So even before overt attacks on journalism were occurring, we were losing journalists, we were losing newsrooms, we were losing local news in a lot of places. Then we also have more and more Americans choosing to tune into echo chambers, and this is not just on the right, it is also on the left. And when you tune in to these echo chambers, whether the information that you're getting is factual or not, in some cases it's not, their goal is to keep you there as long as possible. And the thing that is stickiest is your rage. So when you tune into these echo chambers, they want to keep you angry. So when you do it, when you click on one of those stations and you spend time listening or watching and you feel so angry, remember that you are being manipulated. And that's not healthy for a society talking to each other. And of course, that's television. Social media is a disaster as far as news goes. And there is so much disinformation. There's so much rage bait out there. And then, now, from the very top of our government, journalists are being shut out of important spaces. Their credibility is constantly being undermined. Of course, we know public media was defunded. We're not going anywhere, I promise. Defunded, not defeated. All of this is weakening journalism. It's also weakening our democracy. A free press is essential to a functioning democracy. Journalism does so many things, but one of the most important things journalism can do is hold people in power accountable. When Gallup first measured media trust in the 1970s, and remember this was during the Watergate era, trust in government was way down, but nearly 70% of Americans said they had confidence in newspapers, TV, and radio to report the news fairly and accurately. Contrast that with October of 2025, Gallup did the same poll. The number of Americans with confidence in journalism, 28%. And among Republicans, it was only 8%. And that's really, really scary to me. I am incredibly proud of the work that we do on Talk of Iowa, but much more broadly, the work that we do in public radio. On Talk of Iowa, we always learn something. I get the opportunity to amplify people's stories. I get to dig deep into a subject. I get to talk to amazing authors, scholars, musicians. On Fridays, I get to talk about gardening, which is really, really fun. This is not world-changing work, but it connects us. It gives me the opportunity to build community. And I do firmly believe that we all have the opportunity to connect. We all have the opportunity to make the world a little bit better. One thing you can do is support journalism. Subscribe to the newspaper and pay for a subscription. Support public radio, support public television, support your local libraries. Talk to your neighbors. Support nonprofits you care about. Volunteer. Vote. Work for candidates you believe in. And that, I'm not being exclusive. Work for candidates you believe in no matter what party they represent. Civic engagement is so important. Plant some native plants. That would be great. Put down your phones and connect with each other. The kind of discourse that we have through social media is so toxic, increasingly toxic. And a lot of people do feel like that's where they're putting their political activism. And I think we need to turn it off. I think we need to turn away, and we need to really focus on each other and our communities. And none of us can fix everything, but we all have the opportunity to do something and to connect with each other in a more powerful way. So thank you very much for being here and building community with me today. Anybody want to do questions? So if anybody has questions, Maeve has questions.
Check, check, 1, 2. Hey, all right. So you guys, we are going to use the microphone for questions so that, because we are taping the show, Charity graciously is allowing us to tape it and put it on the library channel on YouTube, so other folks will be able to watch the program. So using the microphone will allow the folks watching online to get to hear the questions as well. So Maeve Clark.
Just let me repeat that George Gallup is an Iowan, because we have to get them wherever we
can.
Yes,
we do.
And I want to thank you for all that you do, and Dennis, all that you did when you were at Iowa Public Radio. And I listen to Iowa Public Radio all the time. In fact, my 2 cats and my dog listen to Iowa Public Radio. And when I'm gone, I keep the radio on so we can have a stimulating conversation when I get home. In fact, today I was listening to Wildcard, I think that's what it's called, and Anne Lamott was being interviewed. And it was, she's an incredible woman, and the interview was really, really good. But a point that you made and a point that she made was that she loved her library as a child because she was curious. She was incredibly curious. And my question to you is, how do we foster that?
Well, I mean, I don't have all the answers to all the things, but I think libraries do a wonderful job fostering that. I mean, story time is just classic. You know, and those are the first moments where kids get into the library. That was how I started going to the library, and my mom had volunteered to coordinate story time, so I was there a lot of extra time because she was there as well. But you know, it's a really good question, because in these days where everybody's got a computer in their pocket, curiosity is quenched in such different ways. And I do it when I have a question, you know, I look up the answer. But I think we're learning about the cost of this technology, and especially for our kids. So I really think keeping it out of the hands of kids for as long as possible, and, you know, go into the library, read your own book, let them wander around. But you know, so many parents do this, and obviously the parents who are going to the libraries are fostering the kids or raising the kids with the curiosity and all the good things. But I don't know. I think that mostly all we can do is make the opportunities available, support the institutions that make the opportunities available, but also be curious ourselves. I think that when you maintain that curiosity and you share it with your friends and you share it with your neighbors, I think it's contagious. But I don't have all the answers, Maeve. Maybe Bingo does? Yeah. Right. Right.
Do we have another question? As I'm running the microphone over to you, I'll tell you, some friends and I were hanging out, and we decided that we were not going to answer every question by looking at our phones.
No.
And because someone's always pulling out the phone to answer the question, and we made a rule for ourselves that we weren't going to do that. And I highly recommend it as an exercise.
Thank you. Regarding the Gallup poll, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but you said the poll in 1970 showed the percentage of people that trusted their government was what? Do you know what that percentage was?
It was
in
below
25?
30%. It was very low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they both went down.
But it's similar to numbers today. So, just because I did skip this because I was worried that I hadn't included it. A lot of people think that public radio audiences are all liberals. We get accused of that all the time. We get accused of a liberal bias all the time. Our mission is fact-based journalism. We don't tell people what to think. We tell them what's going on in the world, and we have people from many viewpoints on the air. And your fellow Iowans back us up on this. No matter what accusations are made, we have a very politically diverse audience. These are 2025 numbers, and they're very affirming to me. All right, other questions?
So Iowa ingredients are diversifying constantly. They help our economy. They're delicious. What are your 2 to 12 favorite Iowa ingredients?
2 to 12. Do you want me to tell you things on the show that I thought were most delicious? Oh my goodness, it's a very hard question no matter what. My family gets a CSA share every summer from Wildwood's Farm in Solon, and I love kale so much more than I ever thought that I could. So that's really fun for me. Anything fresh. I mean, oh my gosh, a homegrown tomato is the best thing a person can eat. It is actually one of my, I would say, tomatoes, homegrown tomatoes and chocolate are my 2 favorite foods, period. Not together, separately. There's just so much. There's so much good stuff out there. And it really, when we were looking for producers on the show, I mean, it was at a time where things were really diversifying fast. And so we were constantly asking, like, what can we do? Can we do black beans? Yes, there's a black bean grower, and it's pretty, everything grows in Iowa. We're a Goldilocks state, at least for now. That's what people say. We're not too hot, we're not too cold. We are just right for growing things.
Do we have another question? Well, I run the microphone back to you. I'll ask Charity this question since you grew up in Iowa. Did you ever eat tomatoes with sugar on top instead of salt and pepper?
I did not, no. But I have eaten them like apples out in the garden. So my grandpa was a big proponent of salt on watermelon. But also I'm a rhubarb fan, and I eat rhubarb with salt. I know a lot of people eat their rhubarb with sugar. So I don't think we would have put sugar on anything. Go ahead.
So less a question than a request for commentary, but, making the library intergenerational. I mean, here in Iowa City in particular, it's like the library has diversified its services. So like I just had to change from a 4G phone to a 5G phone with no information and got tech help at the library. And I know that there are intergenerational reading programs where senior citizens can come and read with kids at story time. And so to me, like that intergenerational experience at the library is expanding and really helpful. It's helpful to me.
Yeah.
It keeps me engaged with other generations in the community.
I actually think a lot about this. You saw my picture of me with my old lady friend. And I always, as a kid, I was a pretty weird kid. I think you probably picked that up from the conversation as well. But I always had intergenerational friends and connections. And then as an adult, and particularly when my kids were born, I realized how incredibly siloed we are now. We're really generations pretty much just interact, with other members of their own generation. And I think it's a real shame. But another thing that we've seen, and we've been talking so much about community on the show, is the disappearance of third spaces in communities, places where you can be and connect with other humans in real life, and a lot of them have gone away. But libraries are the OG third space, and they are not going anywhere, except, we've lost them in some smaller communities. And there are some libraries that don't do programming and don't do a good job getting people in the door, but most libraries are just incredible third spaces, and that is a place where you can interact. And the beautiful thing about it too is if you're like, I would love to have the opportunity to interact with kids in the library, and if you took that to the library and said, would there be a way to start a program where older folks could read to younger folks, they'd be like probably, oh yeah, I think we could do that. I think there's this openness to ideas and connection that is really cool and beautiful. They might make you volunteer, but volunteering's good for you. It's good for your health. It's good for your mental health. Unless you have to stay up all night at party after prom, Erin. So.
That's the worst. Do we have any other questions?
What news sources do you recommend that are not echo chambers and rage stations?
Okay. Well, Iowa Public Radio is my favorite. But I will, I have my favorite newspapers. I love the Gazette. The Cedar Rapids Gazette is a really excellent paper, and I turn to that regularly. That's my favorite Iowa paper. And I enjoy using on my phone Apple News, which is a news aggregator. And so I can choose, I pay for that subscription, and I can choose the sources on there that I really like. But I think you find what feels right for you. If there's a news source that is giving you stories that you think, wow, that's crazy all the time, double check it against another source. We have crazy stories going on right now, trust me. But you can find these sources that you trust. Plus there is also a website, which I don't have at my fingertips, where they actually track the bias of news organizations over time, and they've got this beautiful illustrated graph where you can see where all of the different news organizations fall. But I think you have to find the ones that really work for you, and also just monitor yourself. Like I got off Twitter years ago because I found that every time I was on Twitter, I just got so angry, and I didn't like the way that it was making me feel. And to call out one of these echo chambers on the left, my dad watches MS Now all the time, and he's always so upset. And there are plenty of things in the world to be upset about, but I'm like, turn it off, and move on. Because not only are they trying to keep you angry and trying to keep you there, they also have so much time to fill. So they're just repeating the same information over and over and over again, and you don't need that. I think that we get addicted to it. It's easy to get stuck in it, but yeah, was that helpful? But there are there are so many different ways to engage with the news too. There are a lot of really great podcasts, and I have found, because the news has been more stressful in the last couple of years, that I actually listen less than I used to, which I'm not recommending. But I also find that I can dose myself. So on a day when I can't listen to Morning Edition because I'm just kind of feeling overwhelmed, then I will listen to Up First from NPR and Hear First from IPR and get the basic information that I need to get through the day. And then some days I listen to 2 hours of Morning Edition in the morning, and It keeps
Were
going.
you thinking of mediabias.com as one of
Oh,
those?
maybe.
Yeah. What's that? Fountas is another. We're just talking about, the organizations that help you kind of decipher which ones.
Right.
And then I also want to remind everyone that your Iowa City Public Library card does give you access to multiple newspapers. If you go into our digital resources, you can read the New York Times, among other things. So, yeah.
Yep.
Are there any other questions that folks might have? Yeah. Always connecting us back to the resources at the library.
Thank you so much for all that you do. You spoke a little bit about common ground and commonality. I wonder if you could say a little bit about what you think is some of the most fruitful common ground to identify. And I'm thinking in particular, I was worried a lot about the Christian nationalist when we were talking. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's really frightening. And what we spoke to a woman who has spent the last 16 years focusing all of her investigative journalism on Christian nationalism. And when she said this, it was sort of the end part of that comment in that montage. But one of the things that's really frightening about it is we've got these big funders at the top with these big ideas, and then they, invest their money in sort of influencers who are spreading the word and manipulating people. And so many of the people who wind up engaged in the movement don't really fully understand what these funders are trying to do. And her research, in very compelling ways, shows that their goal is to overthrow democracy. The phrase that you hear over and over again is secular regime. We're going to overthrow the secular regime. And it's really frightening because I believe that we have freedom of religion in this country, and we were not founded as a Christian nation, even though many of our founders were indeed Christian. But common ground, I do think we can find in so many ways. But if you have someone in your life who only wants to talk to you about politics and they only want to represent their viewpoint, that's really tough. You can ask questions, you can draw them out, you can ask them why they think what they think and what they're worried about, and you'll probably learn a lot, but you can't make them listen. And that's a hard thing. There's this sort of indoctrination really is hard to break through. But if you can talk about things you want for your community, if you can talk about, parks and maybe clean water and public schools, the public schools have been so vilified. But when I was growing up in Iowa, that was another part of the Iowa exceptionalism. We were yes, truly indoctrinated in that sense. We were number one. We had the number one school system in the nation. And it was something we all really believed in, I thought. So, I think that there are these common ground things that we do share and we do believe in fundamentally. But the way that we engage in national politics has shifted so much, and people, it's like they're rooting for sports teams, instead of actually thinking about the issues. And then when it comes to state politics and city politics, and people are so bored to tears by that, but that's the stuff that actually changes our lives. And obviously, for example, with libraries, people really did mobilize and speak out against that legislation. But for years and years, things were getting passed and nobody was paying attention. Nobody was noticing. And this accountability to constituents seems to be far less powerful than it used to be. So I don't have that answer for you. I'm sorry. And it can be very personally painful. We did we gathered a lot of voices from people across the state for this series. And one of the questions that we asked people is, how have you personally experienced this cultural division that is causing so much stress? And so many people talked about losing friends or not being able to talk to family members. Or there were 2 people who are in the LGBTQ community, 2 people who live here in Iowa City who separately, they weren't together, told me about people shouting slurs at them and removing a pride flag from their porch and leaving hateful language on, in their door. And they were both like, I felt safe in this community. I've felt safe here. So there's so much pain out there right now. And I don't know how we fix it, but I know that I can do something to connect with people around me. And, maybe even if we're talking about the garden, so we don't have to talk about politics, then there's at least that connection, and we remember that we're humans. It's useful.
Does anyone else have a question? Okay, well, we have some refreshments. We have some cookies and some lemonade and some tea for some community time. Spend a little time together. We can have some nice conversations with each other. Everyone, let's thank Charity. Thank you.